Okay, one of the most common questions I see related to dividend investing is this right here. How do I make 500 bucks a month in dividends? Anytime you search anything related to dividends, I always see this question come up. So in this video, I want to show all the ways to make 500 bucks a month in dividends, or at least the major pathways that you have. I often show my investment journey on this channel, and if I come to the dividend side of my portfolio, this is what I'm actually doing. And I always leave a link to my entire portfolio linked below each video. But I'm going to take it one step further in this video. Instead of just showing you guys and talking about what I'm doing, I'm going to dive into the math of all these different investment vehicles to see exactly how you can make 500 bucks a month in various ways. And maybe by the end of this, you can see exactly why I made these specific investments. And of course, before we get started, go ahead and subscribe to the channel just in case YouTube decides to stop recommending the channel out of the blue. They have a habit of doing that. But when it comes to making 500 bucks a month in dividends, there's a few key variables involved. Number one is the amount invested. Number two is the time involved, and this is extremely powerful and rather key in all these calculations. And third is DRIP, so that stands for Dividend Reinvestment Plan, and that helps with the compounding effect over time. So those are the main variables involved. But of course, you need a investment vehicle to put all that time and money into, and that's going to greatly affect the outcome. Now, what you don't want to do is go to a list of high dividend ETFs and randomly pick the highest yielding assets. That's not a good way of going about this. I have plenty of videos on the channel about what I think are good ETFs, but in this video, I want to demonstrate a variety of paths. So I'm going to start with a bond ETF, BND. It's actually this one right here, BND, Vanguard Total Bond Market ETF, one of the most popular ETFs on the market. It's not quite a dividend, but they're known as fixed income assets. Then we're going to move on to VIG, which is a pretty low dividend ETF, but it's focusing on dividend appreciation over time. Then we're going to move on to SCHD, which is one of my favorite dividend ETFs of all time. It has good dividend growth as well as a decent starting yield. Followed by Divo. So this one is quite different. It's an ETF that I love a lot. And you can see the starting yield is way higher because of a covered call strategy. But most of this ETF is similar to SCHD. So we're going to see how it performs and stacks up over the long run. Okay, so now let's walk through the math on how I'm going to be calculating this and all the tools I'm going to be using. And by the way, I'm going to link all of the resources I use down below. So beginning with BND, looking at the past 5 years, I'm going to use that as the sample size. And in terms of the price appreciation, we're going to need to calculate the CAGR, or the compounded annual growth rate. And for that, we have a calculator. So currently the price is 86.24, so I'm going to put that in as the end value. 86.24, and 5 years ago it was sitting at around 83.58, and that was over a time period of 5 years, and that gives us a CAGR of 0.63%. So now I'm going to come over to this calculator, which is a dividend calculator that projects it over a period of time. So I'm going to go ahead and put the CAGR in this field, so that was 0.63%. To find the dividend data, we can come to this tab, come down, and right now it's at 2.16%, but I'm going to go ahead and give it the benefit of the doubt because if you come to the historical dividend yield, it has been more in the past. It is crashing recently. I don't think it's a great investment, but let's go ahead and say the yield is 2.5%. And because this is a fixed income asset, there is no dividend growth associated with it. So let's go ahead and plug these numbers into the calculator. 2.5% dividend yield, 0% dividend increase. I'm going to be running the simulation for 10 years, and I put in a 15% tax rate. If we go ahead and run the simulation, in order to have that 500 bucks a month or 6,000 bucks per year in dividend income, with this asset, you would need an initial investment of 240,000 bucks. Now we can lower the amount we need invested if we allow for more time. So let's give it 10 years to achieve that 6,000 bucks in annual dividends. So if we give the money 10 years in the market, then we only need 225,000 bucks, and we can see here by the end of 10 years, we have just over 6,000 bucks of annual dividend income. And the last thing we can do is the DRIP, so Dividend Reinvestment Plan. Now we only need 185,000 bucks and 10 years of time to achieve that goal. And this is what it looks like altogether. So if you want that 500 bucks a month in dividend income right now, $240,000 in this vehicle is what you need. If you give it 10 years, $225,000. And if you give it 10 years plus a drip, you only need $185,000. Okay, but now let's move on to an actual dividend ETF. And we're going to begin with VIG. This is one of the most popular dividend ETFs on the market. It has pretty good dividend growth, unlike the previous asset, although the starting dividend yield is quite low. So we're going to see how that affects all the numbers. So again, first we have to figure out the CAGR of the asset over 5 years. So 5 years ago, the price was 82.88, and now it's 160.94. So that comes to a CAGR of 14.19%. Come over to this calculator and put in the new numbers. In terms of dividend data, VIG has a dividend of 1.5% and a growth rate in the dividend of 6.32%. And I forgot to mention, for all these calculations, just to keep it simple, we're not doing any additional annual contributions. We're just letting the machine compound. So with this investment, because the starting dividend yield is only 1.5%, in order to immediately achieve that $500 a month in dividend income, you would need $400,000 invested. So that goes to show the importance of the starting dividend yield. However, if you allow this to run for 10 years, because it has dividend growth to it, you only need a starting principal of $70,000 if you want to achieve the income in 10 years' time. So that's significantly better, and if we add the DRIP, so reinvested dividends, we would only need $62,000 of starting principal to achieve the same outcome. So in comparison to the fixed income, these are how the numbers look with VIG. So because the starting yield is a lot lower, you need a lot more money, but dividend growth is a super powerful thing, and because of that, we can see over time the starting principal you need gets drastically lowered. All right, now let's do this with SCHD. This is everyone's favorite pure equity dividend ETF. So let's run the numbers and see how this one looks in comparison to VIG. So the CAGR for SCHD is around 12.92%. So that's a little bit lower than the 14 whatever of VIG. However, the expected annual dividend increase is a lot more. For SCHD, the 5-year average growth rate in the dividend is 13%. So that's significantly higher, and also the starting dividend yield right now is around 2.8%. So with SCHD, if you want to immediately have that income, you need to invest $215,000. Now here comes the magic with SCHD. If you give it 10 years to achieve this goal, you only need an initial investment of $24,000. And if you enable DRIP, it's even less at only around $17,000. So comparing the numbers for SCHD versus VIG, we can see the importance of a decent starting yield and having double-digit dividend growth. It really makes a significant difference over time. Okay, now I want to take this one step further and do this with Divo. This is an enhanced dividend income ETF, and what that means is it's mostly similar to SCHD. They focus on investing in high-quality dividend growth companies, but they also do some tactical covered call selling on top of it, and they do that in order to raise the starting dividend yield at the expense of some price appreciation. Now, we do have a slight issue with Divo in calculating the numbers because this ETF isn't quite 5 years old. We can see it came into existence in December of 2016, and it's currently the beginning of September of 2021. So the earliest price was 25, but I know during this time, September through December of 2016, the market did appreciate a lot. So to try and account for some of that, instead of putting in that 25 figure, I'm going to put in 24. So with that, the CAGR comes out to around 8.56%. Now looking at the dividend data for Divo, we're going to run into the same issue of it not being 5 years old. In fact, if we look at the dividend history of this ETF, they changed up their strategy and their payout schedule in 2018, and they also have this special dividend in December of 2019, which kind of messes with the numbers a little bit. But we can look at articles like this, which talk about the double-digit annual dividend growth track record of this ETF. So it says the fund's dividend has grown at a double-digit annualized rate since inception. The growth seems to be accelerating, with the fund's dividend grown by 17% these past 12 months. And generally, the growth is above average for the industry. And we can see here that the 3-year CAGR of the dividend is around 10%. So SCHD had a growth rate in the dividend of 13%, and for Divo, I'm going to put in 10%, so a little bit less. Now, in terms of the starting yield, Divo is around 5%, so very high, and that's due to the covered call aspect of this ETF. So I'm going to go ahead and put in 4.9%. And also this pays out on a monthly basis, which is pretty nice. So with these numbers, you only need to invest 120,000 bucks to immediately have this income level. Now, something kind of interesting is if you give it 10 years, you only need 24,000 bucks invested to give you that level of income. And if you remember, that's actually exactly the same as it was for SCHD. And with the dividends reinvested and 10 years of time, it's only 14,000 bucks of initial capital needed. So these are the final numbers for Divo. And if we compare that to SCHD, you're going to notice because the starting dividend yield is a lot higher, you need a lot less initial capital than SCHD to achieve that level of income right now. Although just by coincidence, if you give it 10 years of time, you only need 24,000 bucks in each of the ETFs to achieve that level of income. And that's because SCHD's growth in the dividend was slightly more, so over time it caught up. And if you reinvest the dividends, Divo is slightly more efficient at only 14,000 bucks needed. So I guess we finally answered the question. Those are the major pathways you can go about to make 500 bucks a month in dividend income. And if I come back to my portfolio and look at my dividend assets, I chose to go with Divo and SCHD. And hopefully now you can understand why I think these are some of the better dividend assets over time. Because I'm younger, I focus on the growth of the dividend over time. That's one of the most important things to me as an investor. And if we come back and look at the data, that's exactly why I don't focus on fixed income assets, because the compounding just isn't on your side. And as we saw with VIG, the starting dividend yield makes a difference. So that's why I think SCHD and Divo are some of the best dividend growth ETFs that you can hold for the long term. Now, I have to give a quick disclaimer. Should have done this in the beginning probably, but this is just a simulation. It's a calculator. It's rinse and repeat for 10 years in a row, and real life isn't like that. Things can happen, things can change, but hopefully this gives you a basic idea of the potential of these assets. And the biggest thing that's actually going to prevent you from achieving these results is actually you, not the market. Can you hold a single asset for 10 years straight? Because that's the only way that these assets are going to have the time to compound and give you these amazing returns in the long run. But that's the end of the video. If you guys are still watching and enjoyed, get the video a like, subscribe to the channel, all that YouTube stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.